This conference will now be recorded.
All right, and just to let everyone know, there's also a chat function. If you want to have any discussions or drop any questions during the presentation in there, we'll moderate and we'll get to them at the end. So today's event deals with strategy management. We have to set organization objectives that are aligned to strategic direction, generally in line with the standards. But is there more that we can do as the quality representatives in our organizations? Hopefully we can answer that question for you tonight. We've got a wonderful speaker, Janhavi Yadwad, who's been a member of our committee for over a year now, and she's got some valuable knowledge to share with us. Janhavi's got a wealth of experience from various industries and sectors spanning over 20 years as a quality professional, and she heads up our communications within the committee. She happens to be dialing all the way from Mumbai tonight, and she's kindly agreed to stay awake. It's 11 o'clock there now, so we really do appreciate you taking the time to engage with us tonight, Janhavi. And yeah, you can see she's the real trooper in the group. So I'll leave it to you, Janhavi, to take over from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you for your kind words and the kind introduction. Good evening, everyone. Again, thank you for joining us for this event today. Before I begin with my presentation, as a member of the London Branch Committee, I would like to share a quick preview into what's in store for 2022 ahead at the London Branch events. For this year, we've adopted a focused approach towards putting together events in varied formats, and we'll have multiple, experts as guest speakers from multiple sectors and industries. Our theme for this year would be revolving around the role of quality in various sectors. At the London branch, we endeavor to be aligned to the CQI's strategy, to the central CQI strategy, and have our events and initiatives aligned with that. So in line with that, we have a role of quality in various sectors where we will be throwing light on in the year ahead. Some of the sectors we've lined up for the year are construction, education, telecommunications, pharmaceuticals, corporate culture building, to name a few. The intent is to underscore the fact that quality is a universally applicable discipline, agnostic to any specific sector or industry. So do watch out for our adverts on social media in the coming months and the branch events calendar on the CQI website as well. So with your permission, I begin the presentation now. So in the first event for this year, we will be looking at a very fundamental role of quality in any organization. The role of quality in strategy management. That's the theme on which I will be sharing my views with you. Through this presentation, I'll be sharing my views on this subject in brief and would look forward to knowing your views as well, which you may please type in the chat or even join us in a discussion after the end of the presentation. My fellow committee members will be monitoring the chat, and at the end we can discuss a few. Great. So Ramel, yes, you may request you to proceed to the slide. Sure. So we begin with a brief background. In order to understand what is the role of quality in strategy management, we must first understand what strategy management is. So in layman's terms, strategy can be understood as the approach one adopts to achieve something. So the how will you do what you have set out to do, and the thought behind that how is the strategy. What I mean is the how with which whatever you have set out to do, how will you do it? The how part of how will you do it, whatever you have set out to do. That's the thought, and that's in a simple terms strategy. So just to simplify it further, there is an example here of a sports team. A sports team wanting to win a match. How do they plan to go about it? That would be an example of a strategy. So what they have set out to do is not just play the match, but win the match. That's what they have set out to do. How do they intend to do it? How do they plan to do it? Is the strategy. A company wanting to launch a new product, how do they plan to go about it? That's an example of strategy. Or even at an individual level, say wanting to conquer Mount Everest. So how does she or he plan to go about it? That would be strategy. So strategy need not be a very corporate or a complex term. It is very much applicable in our personal lives, in our daily lives, at an individual level as well as at a group level. Yes, Ramil, next, please. Okay. Now, great. There was a little bit of a challenge in the Mentimeter platform where we wanted to take a poll. So never mind. Rather than taking a poll, I will just mention this to you. This was the question: that what are the components of strategy and the sequence in which they occur? Now, there is a lot of interchangeability. There is a lot of confusion in the sequence. What comes first? What means what? So this is an attempt to clarify that confusion, that ambiguity. So the large components of strategy are understood to be mission. Mission is also known as purpose, alternatively. So it's mission that comes first, then comes the vision, then comes the goal, and then comes the BSC, or the balanced scorecard of the organization, which are further percolated to the key result areas, that's the KRAs, and the objective. So looking at the diagram on the screen, to the left, you can see the downward arrows. So what leads to what? That's the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, we can see what is it that it means, because this is from experience and observation that many organizations still struggle at finding out what is it, and then the meanings get interchanged and confused. So mission, so this is a little bit of a background about strategy before we actually dive into what role does quality play. So before we dive into what role does quality play, this is just to get all of us on the same page on what is strategy management cycle all about. So mission basically is, why is the company in the business in the first place? Someone just thought of something and started a business, but started with some thought in the mind. So that's the mission, that's the purpose with which they have come into the market and they have launched the business. The mission or the purpose generally does not change. So if you are a healthcare provider, if it's a hospital that you've set up, so your mission would be to provide best value healthcare, good healthcare. That cannot change. That has to remain the same. You are in the business of medical care because you want to provide the best healthcare. So mission and purpose mostly do not change for decades or centuries unless there is a shift in the organization's outlook or at a strategic level. That's not a dynamic component. Then the mission leads to the vision. Vision, as is familiar to everyone, something to do with sight, something to do with the eyes. So vision is, where do you see yourself? Where do you want to be? By when? So we'll stick to the example of the hospital that we took at the start. So the mission of the hospital, say ABC Hospital in London, for example, is a new hospital that I've set up. So why are you in this business? The mission of my organization, of my hospital, is to provide best health care. That's the mission. Vision, where do you want to be and by when? These two, where and by when, are very important in order to save on the ambiguity and the vagueness of the term, to give it a more specific and time-bound direction. So the vision could be to be the most preferred or the most affordable healthcare provider in London, or maybe the most preferred or the most affordable healthcare provider in England. So that could be the vision. And by when? So if maybe right now your operating costs are high, you are not really in a position to break even or make it even that affordable. So you could set a timeline for yourself. If you've launched your business in 2022, maybe by 2025, you could expect to have your break even reached and be an affordable provider by that time. So where do you want to be? Which means, what do you want to achieve? By when is what the vision translates into. The vision further leads to the goals, because the vision can have a horizon of a 5-year or a 10-year term. To quote CQI example, we have our CQI strategy 2030, which is in use right now. So in 2019 and 2020 itself, we had the roadmap for 2030 already laid out. So that's a 10-year horizon that's already laid out to us. So the goals are those which the broader vision is broken down into concrete and measurable goals. So if it's a 10-year vision, that can be broken down into immediate goals, short-term goals, and long-term goals. So immediate could vary somewhere between a year or 2 years. Short-term could be between 3 years and 5 years. And long-term could be, of course, 10 or 15 years, but cannot be longer than how much the vision has been proclaimed up to. If the vision announced is up to 2030, obviously the longest term goal cannot go beyond 2030. And last, we have the BSC, the Balanced Scorecard. So the goals further percolate down the line into objectives and actionables. Now, what's the difference between BSC and KRAs? The arrow next to the BSC, you have two arrows that suggest the balanced scorecard further leads to the KRAs of individual employees, the key result areas. Interchangeably, it's also called the KPIs in some industries, key performance indicators and objectives. So balanced scorecard, the BSC, is of the company level. And that BSC has to be percolated into departmental and individual level KRAs and objectives. Further in the presentation, we have a picture and an example of catch-ball exercise that we must have heard about. So that's to do with the components of a strategy: mission, vision, goals, BSC, the sequence in which they flow and how one leads to the other. Yes, Ramil, next, please. Okay, so those were the components of strategy. Now we come to the strategy management cycle. Now, strategy management is not something which starts at a point and ends at another point. It's a cycle, it's a loop, it's an ongoing thing, because it's an annual thing. So what is run during a year, you would want the best things to continue in the subsequent year, and you would want the not so good things to be dropped in the next year. So you would want what went well to be carried forward, and you would want what went wrong to be dropped. Therefore, strategy management is a cycle and not a line, because it's an ongoing loop. So it all begins with a SWOT analysis or an environment scan, which is popularly known. Also, a pestle analysis is something which is now in use. Of course, these are may sound jargon because these are very, very specific to strategy management vocabulary. So, and these topics are also very vast. So I do not intend to spend much more time on this, because each of these steps in the cycle also merit one full session for themselves. But just to draw the connection, that where does it all begin from? Therefore, the depiction here. So SWOT, we all may be aware: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. These four factors are analyzed. The environment is scanned for the same purpose. Where does my business stand vis-a-vis the environment? That's the SWOT analysis and environment scan, which is done as the first step, and then the strategy formulation begins. That's how the strategy formulation is done. After the strategy is formulated, the strategy needs to be communicated. It needs to be communicated to the people who are actually going to execute it. So after strategy communication in the cycle, the step comes with a strategy deployment. Deployed as in how is it made a part of their day-to-day activities, of their role, so that they remain aligned to the deliverables and the objectives. That's the strategy deployment. We will see this in detail in the coming slides. Once the strategy is deployed, communicated, it actually needs to be executed also, because many a times it is observed, it is read, it is heard that the strategy is formulated within the confines of the boardroom with a few selected board members or the top officials, and that's it. It remains on paper. It does not get executed for some reason, or maybe only the excitement remains at the start when it is announced or launched, but then it It seldom makes it to the point where it is expected to be towards the end of the year. So the execution, the key lies in execution. The devil also lies in the execution, because that is where many companies come to and fail. So strategy execution is an integral and very, very critical part in the success of the entire strategy management. And periodic review. Sorry. So since this is a year-long activity, because it's done for every fiscal, every financial year, therefore we have an annual window here. After periodic review, you see the arrow doesn't stop. The arrow goes back to the SWOT analysis and environment scan, which is why it is a continuous cycle. So by periodic review, we mean once the strategy execution or the communication is done, is it being executed the way it is expected to be? Is it operationalized the way it is required to be? Needs to be reviewed at regular intervals. If there is any ad hoc unforeseen change in the environment, there's a course correction which is done. It could be the internal environment, it could be the external environment as well. You have wars being waged at any time now. So there are a lot of external global uncertainties in the coming, in the current time. Therefore, a periodic review is very much essential if things are going well to sustain that, and if things are not going well, those need to be looked into immediately, and course correction needs to be done. All of this again feeds back into SWOT analysis. Why? One would think the SWOT analysis was already done at the start. Why is the arrow again connecting there? That's an input for the next year's SWOT analysis, because we had periodic reviews done, and whatever the output of that review was, it was either one of our strengths or it was either one of our weaknesses. Because the S and W out of the SWOT, the strengths and weaknesses, are internal to us, to the organization. Strengths are our internal positive, and weaknesses are our internal negatives. Whereas the O and the T are the external factors. Opportunities are the external positive, and threats are the external negative. So therefore, this continuous loop and the continuous cycle on an annual basis. That's the strategy management cycle. We will see this diagram ahead in the slides as well. This will help you recall this discussion. Sure, Ramil, next please. Okay, so once the strategy has been formulated and communicated, and all the steps have been followed, what about the success? It was drawn to be successful. It was drawn, so much effort was put into a strategy in order to fetch something. So what does research say about strategy success rate? Things go well and things go wrong as well. First, we need to see what goes wrong, what went wrong. So most companies have ambitious plans for growth, but very few of them ever realize them. So according to a research paper by the Harvard Business Review, over a particular period that they had conducted the review for, 7 out of 8 companies, that almost 90%, in a global sample of 1,854 large corporations, failed to achieve profitable growth. Yet, it's alarming and it's a little contradictory that these companies who failed to achieve what they had set out to achieve had actually developed a detailed strategic plan with much higher targets. So it's not that they ventured without a strategy. They had planned it, they had strategized it, and they took on their target with a strategy. Then what went wrong? Why did they not achieve it? So why is there such a persistent gap between ambition and performance? That's the question that pops up. So the research further says that the gap arises from a disconnect between the strategy formulation and the strategy execution. Therefore, I had said in the previous slide that the key lies in the execution, the devil also lies in the execution. So the research further revealed that on an average, 95% of a company's employees were unaware of or did not even understand the strategy of the organization. Again, one would argue, why should the employee or even the last mile employee be aware of it? The employee is just supposed to come to office every day, do the work given, and go back. But then those are human beings. Those are not machines or robots that you're dealing with. So the very important factor is that the employees are the ones who work closest to your customers. You are sitting in the confines of the boardroom and drawing plans for the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. But your last mile employee, your frontline employees, are those who are closest to the customers. They are the face of your organization. And they operate the very processes that you've designed. And these processes are the ones which actually create value for the customer. So these people at the core are unaware of the strategy. So then the gap is bound to occur. There is no connect established between the employee and the strategy of the organization, that sense of belonging, the sense of ownership, the sense in the employee's mind that my job is also adding value to the overall organization goal or strategy. Whatever I do on my daily basis is adding to the overall organization's target or goal. That's a very fulfilling and very encouraging feeling that any employee would feel. It's for the management to ensure that inclusion up to that level is practiced in the organization. So that is research, that's what this research says was what went wrong, which is why we see in the pie chart here that 95% of the companies, 95% of the employees were not aware, only 5% were aware. I am sure these 5% would have been the ones in the boardroom who were a part of formulating the strategy. It never percolated down. Next, Raman. Next slide. What went well? No, I'm so sorry. Prior to this. Yes. So things that went wrong, we saw, but then things went well too. The same research has covered both the sides, the good and the bad. So the research further had to say that few companies had indeed achieved their goals. So what is it that they did differently than the ones in the prior example? So these organizations that have managed to sustain their strategy focus have typically established a new unit at the corporate level to oversee all the strategy related activities, called Office of the Strategy Management, OSM, which is popularly called now in the corporate parlance. They did not exist earlier. Well, it did, but more or less it met the same fate which the quality professionals were meeting, where it was left to be the responsibility of everyone. So whatever is left to be owned by everyone or responsibility of everyone ends up becoming no one's. Something which is everybody's responsibility ends up becoming nobody's responsibility. So of late, strategy's importance has been valued, has been realized, and a corporate level centralized team, or like you have a CEO's office, like you have an MD's office, typically there's an office of strategy management which is evolving. Now, the tools used by the strategy, what does the strategy office do? Let me come back one step. What does the strategy office do? It is led by the chief strategy officer, or in most of the companies, it is led by the CEO himself. What's the primary task of the strategy office? The primary task of the strategy office is to ensure that all of those boxes in that circle, which we saw in the strategy management cycle, are being done and are being done in the way they are supposed to be done. That's the role of the strategy office. Now, our role comes into picture. How does the strategy office manage that? So the tools used by the strategy office to ensure that the strategy management cycle is successfully and effectively operationalized and just does not remain on paper, the tools which are used were nothing but our very own age-old quality tools. So now we go towards the correlation or the theme, the subject for this discussion of this presentation is the role of quality in strategy management. So far, this was my attempt to give a background on a strategy management in brief. Of course, it's a very in-depth and complex topic. I've just tried to put together a few brief points. And now we venture into the heart of the discussion, which is the next. Role of quality. So role of quality as a catalyst. So I had said that we will be visiting that diagram again in the next slide. So this is here. So this is the cycle, the strategy management cycle. And one by one, we see the correlation. So once, Ramil, you finish plotting all, or maybe you can wait for a moment and I will explain the correlation. So first, to the left, we see the same cycle which we saw earlier, strategy management cycle. Now, considering SWOT analysis and environment scan as point number one, please correlate that to the right-hand side, the description which will come under the quality tools methodology employed. So the numbered points to the right are correlating to the boxes to our left. So point number one says competition benchmarking, risk analysis, employee-led process improvements, Kaizens. So this point number one correlates to the SWOT analysis and environment scan. So how we read this is that role of quality as a catalyst here is that in order to perform a good, effective, healthy SWOT analysis and an environment scan, what is it that the strategy office needs, or what is it that the strategy office does? It does a competition benchmarking, which is a quality tool. It does risk analysis, which is a quality tool. Employee-led process improvements, because that is an integral strength of the organization. When you list your strengths, your employees, your human resources are your greatest strengths. Not just that, if they are of a mindset or a culture of continual improvements and they have knowledge management repository in the form of Kaizens, that's a super plus strength for you. So the point number one correlates to the first box. Point number two, healthy brainstorming. That correlates to the strategy formulation box. So how is strategy formulated? You have the best minds of the organization sitting together with a healthy brainstorming. Brainstorming, if we recall, is one of the 7 quality tools, one of the 7 QC tools. We use that in Six Sigma, DMAIC approach as well. We use it in the Japanese 7 QC tools as well. So that's the tool, quality tool again. Number 3 is the strategy communication box after formulation. How is strategy communicated? Once formulated, how is it communicated? It is communicated in the form of a cascade or a waterfall method. That is also correlating to the diagram to the top right. You have in the blue downward arrow, goals and KPIs flowing down, and you have the results in the green arrow flowing up. So you have goals which percolate top down. The company's goals, the strategic goals, then comes to the tactical, that is the middle management level goals, and then to the last mile or the plant or the operational goals. The other way around happens with results. So at the start of the year, your goals are percolated top down. At the end of the year, your results are totaled up bottom up. That's how the cascading methodology works here. Point number 4 is Oshin Kandri catchball exercise. So point number 4 correlates to the strategy deployment box in the diagram to your left. So strategy deployment, a very, very effective tool is Oshin Kandri or catchball exercise. We all know Mr. David Hutchins is an authority on this subject. So there's a lot of material that is there on his website. He's also presented he's also presented on Oshin Kandri at one of our events at the London branch last year. So Oshin Kandri, policy deployment model and catchball exercise. So the diagram to the right below the arrows is the catchball process. What is catchball process? How is it deployed? How is the strategy deployed? The group goals and priorities are decided first. So in the prior slide, we saw that goals are then percolated into the balanced scorecard of the organization, the BSC, and then the KRAs of the individuals, of the department heads. So to your right, you can see this catchball process diagram. So there is communication flow to the left arrows, and you have the negotiation and alignment to the right arrows. One would wonder, what is there to negotiate? Negotiation is the targets that one takes for the year. So the targets need to be realistic, and negotiation is not about reducing the target or pressurizing someone with an excess target. The term negotiation here means if a doable target, but at the same time also an ambitious one is given to the person in line. What are the resources or the support which is required along with that in order to achieve that? That's called the negotiation and alignment process. Alignment is that in the line of reporting, in the hierarchy of reporting, the goals must flow. So if I have my goal sheet, my objectives have to have something from my boss and has to have something going down the line to my reportees, to my deputies as well. That's how the flow and alignment is ensured. Then you have, after Hoshin Khandri and catchball exercise, just hit the next key, Ramil. There are 2 more points to come. Yes, process mapping and standard operating procedures. So point number 5 correlates to the next box in the cycle, which is strategy execution. So you've had your strategy formulated, you've had it communicated, maybe you've put it up visually in your company at key points and key corridors so that it keeps motivating to your employees, and it is deployed, it's gone and sat in their goal sheet, in their targets. But how is it that they're supposed to do? What is it that they're supposed to refer to in order to execute that task? So the strategy execution, the tool required for strategy execution is process mapping, standard operating procedures, SOPs. Again, our very own quality tools. After that comes periodic review. So the next or the 6th point is our very own PDCA cycle. PDCA cycle of continual improvement. That is also interchangeably used, continuous improvement or continual improvement. A slight clarification there. Continuous is something which continues on its own. It doesn't need to have any special effort from anyone. So your nails grow every week, your hair grows, your beard grows. That's continuous. We don't have to take any efforts. Continual is where we have to put efforts for it to continue. So continual improvement is a conscious approach adopted for improvement. Not being comfortable with status quo is a positive sign here. So therefore, periodic review is nothing but our plan, do, check, act, PDCA cycle of continual improvement. If you just hit the next key, Ramil, we have a diagram for PDCA also. The plan, do, check, act is our Deming circle. It's also called the Deming wheel in our quality fraternity. So how is quality related to strategy management? So this slide kind of gives us a summary, the role of quality as a catalyst in successful execution of strategy management. And then I come to the last slide. Next, please, Raman. Great. So what would the takeaway be from this, my thoughts that I share? So the takeaway that I would want to leave you with is that only a robust quality management system in an organization can lead to a successful strategy management end-to-end. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Janhavi.
Yes.
Fantastic presentation there. And we just allow opportunity now for questions.
Sure. Not just questions, if anyone has any views to share from their own experiences, welcome that as well. Need not really be questions. I may or may not have the answer, but it's nice to hear everybody's views because everyone comes from various sectors and industries. So whatever their experiences have been, we'll be happy to hear.
Very true. Yes, I guess it's generally good feedback, and I think the theme rings true across various organizations. So it's always a very engaging topic and an excellent presentation.
Thank you. Anyone would like to share any experience of their strategy management, maybe? Oh, there's a question there from
Yeah, it's
Jenna.
from Genna. So, what should a quality professional do if they are ignored by top management in strategy conversations? It's a
Oh,
very good
yes.
question from Genna.
Yes, yes. And I believe it's a very common scenario in a lot of companies. So it's really a matter of a little bit of regret that we are talking about industry 4.0 and quality 4.0, but then quality still has to find its due importance in many boardrooms yet. But I think it's about time that we saw the example of companies not making it, having their strategies failed. In fact, there are some big names. I would have loved to mention that in the presentation, but I stopped short of mentioning those. Let me mention those now. We have Kingfisher Airlines, we have Kodak, the camera company, we have Nokia. So there are case studies of these companies at in textbooks at management college levels, that they were giants at one point in time. They ruled the market share. So what happened to them all of a sudden? It's because their strategy failed in one or the other of those boxes, and quality was ignored again, is what we can say. And that's how this is what is the fate that these companies see. Either they dissolve, or they're taken over, or they are nowhere in the market. Also, it's up to us, quality professionals, also to some extent, Gena, for us to show our worth, for us to show the value that we add to the organization, to the overall company's target or goals. So maybe in that way, we can make our contribution more visible, and we will not be ignored in strategic conversations. Also, I feel this Office of Strategy Management, the central overseeing office which is being set up. Similarly, there is also, or there should be also, a central quality management office, and the heads of these two verticals need to be in tandem with each other. So quality and strategy need to speak to each other all the time. There needs to be a regular handshake at that level. So strategy and quality can go hand in hand. One supports the other. So quality will not be ignored.
Okay, thanks for that, Janhavi. Another question from Ian. Can you explain, please, the difference, as you understand it, between strategy deployment and strategy, oh God, because it jumped up, and strategy execution? So a difference between strategy deployment and strategy execution.
Sure. Deployment is, where do you formalize it? Where does it go and become a part of your deliverable? So deployment would be the catchball exercise that we saw. How are you deploying it?